Orlando, Florida. Got the pleasure of meeting with Marshall here with FIT, as well as a former police officer with Palm Bay. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for coming out.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Put on a great session today.
Thank you.
Right, the transition from law enforcement to the private sector. It can be a tough road, right? Trying to figure out how you fit into the world outside of law enforcement.
Well, it really can. And some of my students at the university engaged in with a project after talking with Ben Dugan and Rich Rossman. I met them at the Florida Police Chiefs last January, and they said, hey, we're having this problem where law enforcement's really struggling with transition into the retail side. And they said, you know, you do leadership stuff. That's my passion. You know, do you have any thoughts? And I said, well, I have thoughts, but until we research it, it's really hard to know. So over the last few months, we actually sent out a survey and asked folks in retail that were either prior law enforcement or prior military or both, what their experiences have been in transitioning. And we also asked folks who supervise those, what challenges from an organizational standpoint on the retail side have you seen folks have?
Right.
And based on that, we were able to look at and kind of identify some themes from that research, and one of them was a cultural change.
Yeah.
You know, law enforcement, it's close culture.
Yes, it is.
You know,
It's a brotherhood.
It's a brotherhood, it's a sisterhood, and either you're a cop
or you're not.
Or you're not, right?
Yep.
And, you know, one of the things that I have an advantage of is, you know, I'm just an old West Virginia boy and joined the Marine Corps, got the GI Bill, and worked my way through my associates, a bachelor's and a master's while working full-time in law enforcement. Then had an opportunity to retire early, go into academia, and since then I got a master's in IO Psych and a doctorate in business administration. And what I realized was, we have a tendency in our close culture that if it's not about law enforcement, done by law enforcement, endorsed by law enforcement, it may not have value.
Right.
And there's so many things in other industries from a law enforcement standpoint that does have a lot of value. So, you know, I'm kind of like SpongeBob. I assimilate all that stuff and try to use it. But, you know, our culture is so strong that it mitigates a lot of other things.
Yeah.
You know, we all identify, you know, you have biases where it's bias against and a preference for. Mm-hmm. We have such a preference for other cops that we give somebody the benefit of the doubt and credibility right off the bat. So going from that culture to a corporate culture where it's not right or wrong, good or bad, am I making a case to put it in a criminal way, it's here's this situation, and at what point is it going to impact the bottom line from a corporate standpoint, but also realizing there's brand issues.
Right.
You know, do you really want to do this if it's going to give the brand a bad name?
Right. Reputation. Yep.
All of those things is very much a culture shift. And then with the identity, and this is shared both by law enforcement and military, and you've been both as well. You do years and you do a career, your primary identity is being a military member, being a cop, and that whether you go into another job or retail or anything else, that's still a grieving process.
Right.
And if you haven't prepped your transition out of law enforcement to where you have a plan and you're doing things and you've expanded your network beyond just other cops, where it's us or them, you really struggle with that transition. So you add on top of that, going into an environment from in law enforcement land, we all think very similarly.
Right.
You say things very freely because we're in a culture where we're insulated, but we have the same mission. And some folks, when you go into the private sector, may see that you're a cop and have a bias against that. Well, you're a cop. I don't like you. You beat people. Those types of things. So you got the culture, you got the identity. Then there's expectations. So in the law enforcement and military, you go from chain of command. Well, this is easy. I work for this person who works for this person. No, you don't violate chain of command.
Right.
To a corporate culture where it's collaborative, and you may have reporting structures where you're reporting to multiple people, and that's really like, you know, teaching a bird dog to now go chase foxes. It's like, wait, that bird's not a fox, right?
Yep.
And then the last one is leadership. You know, a lot of times retailers will hire prior law enforcement and military and make assumptions, and those assumptions are, if you were a cop, obviously you can lead. Well, if you were a good leader when you were a cop or in the military, that'll transition, but you're leading in a different culture, in a different environment. So it's not authority, it's not rank, it's collaboration, it's building the influence, it's the leadership part, not the rank part.
Right.
And that can be a shift, especially when you go, and the biggest thing that we found, it makes sense to me, in law enforcement, the beauty is you're a public servant, you have a government job. it's hard to get fired.
Right.
The bad side of that is if I'm a supervisor or manager and I have a really subpar employee, it's hard to get fired.
Yep.
Also, everybody gets paid the same.
Right.
It's how much time in service, how much time in rank, there's your pay.
Yep.
You can be a rock star or you can be the bench warmer, you're going to get the same pay. For folks who've had supervisory and management experience on law enforcement, military side, you come into the private sector where my review of their performance matters to their pay raise. Well, that's a huge shift,
Right.
and that really matters. And folks just aren't trained for that. And then you add other cultural dynamics with the new generations and some of the struggles older managers have with the new generation and different things. It makes that leadership that much more important at a time where leadership's actually getting watered down in a lot of cases because of a lot of social pressures, and we've got all these positions that go in field, and people have an expectation to feel good about things, and they're all special.
Right. And having done that transition, and the Murphy's Law, everything that can happen will happen, right? And the impacts on your family because of that change. And I had a sit down with the guys from Survive First earlier, keeping that mental health in check.
They do great work.
Yeah, they do great work. And one of the things that I found, and it probably took me a few years, but initially those challenges that you brought up, spot on. Now, every one of them, it's like, I don't understand. What do you mean I have to? No, you just do, right? But after about 5 years, and I think one of the interesting things that I would love to be able to support guys in the military transitioning, guys in law enforcement, and I have. I mean, our organization, Clear, actually does do that type of work. We network. That's what we are all about, building that network, building that family out. What I think the biggest things guys transitioning from the military and law enforcement can do is really kind of dissect their career.
Yes.
Dissect your career. Because it probably took me 5 to 10 years to really grasp it, and a lot of it was forced on me. But, to supply that knowledge in certain channels, right? You have experience that you don't realize you have, right? And I think that's one of the biggest things I learned through the transition space of about 10 years was, oh yeah, we used to do it this way. Well, what do you mean you used to do it this way? Well, that was kind of part of this, and, it was a small part or whatever. Oh, wow, you have a lot more knowledge than everybody else does on this, So really dissecting your career and taking a look at it holistically to determine where all your knowledge points are.
Well,
because they could fit anywhere.
And it's interesting, and I try to coach folks who are getting ready to retire, and I've encountered this in my consulting business. A lot of my experience comes from the law enforcement side.
Right.
And for those who are getting ready to retire from law enforcement, I want you to think about it this way. A lot of the leadership and management, problem-solving, decision-making, those are general skill sets. And the advantage that law enforcement and military have over other industries is the frequency of critical incidents that allow you to use and hone and sharpen and stretch those skill sets. You go into a different context, you're rubber man.
Right.
I mean, You've seen and you've had to react and respond, and that in itself is a skill set that we often don't take that step back, like you said, and think and ponder on. So you've got that. But the other key is we really have to step back. We've been successful in our careers. We've retired. We've had that knowledge and that experience. But now we're stepping into a different environment where there are common skill sets. But we're going back to the academy, so to speak.
Yeah.
We need to humble ourselves and be students and test assumptions. Not just not assume,
right,
but test assumptions. Learn the jargon. What's the acronym stand for? How does this equate? And at the end of the day, the organization that hires me, yes, their mission and what they want me to do is help deter retail theft, organized crime, and those things.
Right.
But the mission goal is a little bit different.
Sure.
And I go from making decisions on criminal cases to influencing those who still have that.
Yeah. Yep.
But without directly having it.
Yeah.
And the law enforcement network that you've got is great, and it's important. But you got to start developing that network outside of law enforcement. Mm-hmm. And the sooner you can start that transition and make that planning before you retire, the better off you are. And with that is finding folks like yourself that work in the industry. The best thing someone can do who's looking to transition is find somebody within your network who's made the transition and talk to them about the challenges, the rewards. One of the things that emerged as a theme from our research was one comment, well, when I took the job, I thought it was going to be a retirement job and I wouldn't have to do a whole lot.
We hear that quite a bit,
to find out, holy crap, I got to do a lot of work.
Yeah.
And this case can't sit there on my timeline.
Right.
These cases have to be cleared.
Right.
Because there's metrics that go along with the return on investment and productivity, and you need to understand that before you jump into that to that bucket.
Yeah, we hear that quite a bit. And a lot of guys, when they are getting ready to transition, they'll come to this conference just to meet people. So definitely, do that outreach. I can't tell you how important that is, because you're lost.
Yes.
Yeah, you can get lost really easily, and that has a lot of impact on you mentally, physically, with your family. So it's really, I can't express how important that part is, because getting that mentor, that coach, that support can really push you over the finish line into success.
And you hit the nail on the head. It's that mentor. And ideally, you'll find somebody in your organization that has walked a path and done a transition similar to what you've done. And if not, find a mentor in the industry. But here's the most critical thing about being a mentor. You have to invite someone to be your mentor, because you're asking them to intimately tell you, you're screwing this up.
Right.
You need somebody, and you got to invite that. I just can't kind of, hey man,
has to be a
you suck.
Yeah.
You're bad at this.
Yeah.
You have to have that relationship and that rapport, and invite that type of critical feedback, because otherwise you may have slipped down that slippery slope, as we would say in field training and law enforcement, that rather than fixing it here, it got this bad and just made it worse. So invite a mentor, find a mentor, and talk to folks.
Yeah.
You may see a recruiting video, or people may tell you one thing, especially in a larger organization where they're hiring a bunch of different positions. But when you do an interview, have questions after that interview and ask them, tell me about the day-to-day of this job, so you really understand what's happening.
And see if you can ghost them, shadow them, right? See if you can spend time with them. But I think one of the most important things is you as an individual have to be committed to it.
Yes.
Don't expect your mentor to be there and holding your hand and pressuring you and forcing you. You have to have that level of commitment.
You have to look for self-awareness, and you have to have self-drive.
Right.
And a common theme, and talking to folks after my presentation today, they would come and share, man, you hit so many things, and a lot of the things that I finally overcome is I had to figure it out on my own.
Right.
And, people want to help you. Find another former cop, somebody from the service. Find somebody that you have things in common with, and work with them and ask them questions and pick their brains, because in law enforcement, the job's going to get done whether you have good leadership or not.
Right.
In retail, everything depends on each individual doing their part and the team, and people want to see you succeed.
Yeah.
And finding out what everybody's skill sets are. One of the things that we assume, well, that person wasn't a cop, so what's their value?
Right.
Everybody on that team is bringing something that you don't have, and you gotta facilitate and keep that mindset.
Yeah, and I was one of those guys that went through that transition process, and we even had a support network for that. And that's not going to happen. That's not going to happen. And again, Murphy's Law.
Murphy.
Yeah, Murphy come walking in and smack me upside the head.
It's like a hurricane during a conference.
It's like a hurricane during a conference, which keeps coming up. It's not that bad. It's Florida, whatever. It's wind and rain, whatever. It happens. So I had no idea that you had fulfilled the role of doctor. So we do have a doctor in the house. So congratulations on that. That's huge. I mean, that's, you committed yourself to education.
I'm a late bloomer, but
and that's all right.
My father had a 6th grade education.
Yeah.
He was born in 1908.
Yeah.
And it was one of the things that I'm blessed as when I was a kid, that education.
Yeah.
And
it's funny how the folks that, like your father, who didn't have maybe that opportunity, how much they pushed us in that direction, right?
Yeah.
To go out and get your education, and how important that was. So
he didn't want me to be a coal miner.
Well, there you go. And West Virginia, right?
Yeah.
So congratulations on that. Yeah.
Thank you.
And thank you for your service.
And you as well.
Well, I appreciate that. So, Marshall,
it was nice to
great
meet
meeting you. Thanks for spending time with us. Really appreciate it. So thank you so much for coming out to Clear and putting on that session. I think it brings home a lot. Going to talk to the guys, make sure you're, a regular here.
Okay.
I think it's really important to have you come in and speak to folks, because so many folks are close to retirement. I mean, they've been detectives for years, and it's time, right? They're entering the drop or whatever the case may be, and they need that kind of insight. I think it really helps them push them over the ledge a little bit and say, yeah, maybe I need to spend some time and think about what this is.
And don't wait until it's 1 month before I go out on terminal leave for 90 days. Start thinking about this stuff 2 or 3 years in advance, so you can get certificates and you can get training and you can start networking. Like this conference is a great place to network.
Yeah.
Even if you're not working retail theft in your law enforcement agency, these networks are so important, and it shouldn't surprise me,
Right.
but how few people actually avail themselves of those opportunities.
Right. Absolutely. And it's, it's an easy conference to come to. You might learn something.
Yeah,
right?
and it's in Florida.
And it's in Florida, usually not with a hurricane.
Right.
So, all right, Marshall, I really appreciate
Thank
it,
you.
man. Again, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
All right. All right, everybody, JC, wrapping up this nice interview here with Dr. Marshall from FIT Firearms, or I'm sorry, that's my world, Florida Institute of Technology. Thanks again for coming out. I appreciate it. Hey, guys, thanks for joining us for another live stream. We love seeing you out there. Please, hashtag Clear Nation, post your comments, give us some likes. We really appreciate those, and stay tuned for more great content. We'll see you again soon.